Hello and welcome to Message Joe. Subscribe to the channel by clicking on the bell to not miss new videos, and don't forget to like us because it's the best support for us. I never imagined I'd be the guy sharing his personal life online, especially about something like this. But here I am, putting it all out there because, honestly, I don't want anyone to end up in the same twisted mess I did. My name's Ben, I'm 35, and I've been married to Maya for 10 years. A whole decade with this woman. We met back in college, which feels like a lifetime ago now. She had this magnetic energy back then, could light up any room just by walking in. And me? I was the lucky idiot standing next to her, grinning like I'd hit the jackpot, because I couldn't believe someone like her would even give me the time of day. For a long time, I thought things between us were solid. Our friends always called us the perfect couple, and honestly, I started to believe it myself. We had what I assumed was a strong marriage, shared laughs, wild nights out, and plenty of quiet ones at home. That's how it's supposed to be, right? You build a life together, settle into a routine, and assume you'll make it through because you've already come this far. But man, looking back now, I should have noticed the cracks long before the whole thing shattered. It wasn't like she just changed overnight. No, it was way more subtle than that. In hindsight, the signs were there, but I ignored them. Those small moments when something didn't feel right, but I'd brush it off, telling myself it was no big deal. Part of me didn't want to face the truth. I mean, we'd been together for 10 years. You don't just throw that away, right? The first thing that really started feeling off was her work schedule. Maya always worked long hours, but recently, she started coming home even later. I'd ask her about it, and she'd give me the usual excuses. Oh, just another late meeting. Or Luke and I are working on a project that's running long. Luke. Just hearing his name now makes me want to punch a wall, but back then, I didn't think much of it. He was just some guy from her office, or at least that's what I thought. At first, I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? But it kept happening. She'd come home late, sometimes after midnight, and she'd be completely checked out. Her body was there, but her mind was somewhere else, far from me. We barely talked, and when we did, it was surface level, like the usual, "How was your day?" nonsense. And intimacy? Forget it. We were more like roommates than a married couple. We shared a bed, but there was this invisible wall between us, and I couldn't figure out what had gone wrong. I started second-guessing myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe she was just stressed from work. Maybe it was my fault. I wasn't doing enough. You can really drive yourself nuts with all the maybes. But deep down, I knew. I knew something was seriously wrong. I just didn't want to face it. Then came the day everything changed. It was an ordinary afternoon. I was working from home, going through some files on our shared laptop, something we both use for work. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I wasn't even thinking about anything suspicious. But as I was organizing some folders, I stumbled on an email. The subject line wasn't anything unusual, just some work-related stuff. But for some reason, I opened it. And when I did, it felt like a punch to the gut. The email was from Luke, her colleague. But this wasn't about work. Not even close. The content was explicit, to put it mildly. Sure, there was some romantic crap in there, but most of it was straight-up sexual. The kind of stuff you don't write to someone unless you're sleeping with them. As I read line after line of his disgusting words, I felt my blood run cold. Luke wasn't just some coworker. He was the guy my wife was screwing behind my back. And the worst part? She didn't even seem to care enough to cover her tracks. I sat there, frozen, staring at the screen, my mind racing. I could feel this boiling rage building up inside me, but mixed with it was something darker, something I didn't want to admit to myself. I wanted her to suffer. I wanted her to feel the kind of pain I was feeling right then. But I couldn't just fly off the handle. Not yet. If I was going to confront her, I needed more. I needed the full story. How long it had been going on, how deep this betrayal really ran. I couldn't just jump in with only one email. So I did what any guy drowning in suspicion and hurt would do. I started collecting evidence. I needed to know everything. Every call, every message, every dirty little detail. I wanted to see the whole thing play out in front of me. So I installed spyware on her phone and email. I'm not proud of it, but at that point, trust was already out the window. If she was betraying me, I was going to uncover every last piece of it. This software let me see everything: texts, emails, phone logs, all of it. I could even listen in on her calls if I wanted to. It was like I had a front row seat to the wreckage of my marriage. From that point on, I lived a double life. To her, I acted like everything was normal, smiling, laughing, pretending things were fine. But behind the scenes, I was glued to the spyware, checking it every chance I got. I watched in real time as she texted Luke, planning their next meeting. I saw the flirty messages, the suggestive emojis, the dirty jokes. It was like watching her fall in love with someone else, right in front of me, and I couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. The worst part? I had to sit there and act like nothing was wrong. I'd be at the dinner table, listening to her ramble on about her tough day at the office, all the while knowing she had spent that time with him. Every single word that left her lips felt like a slap in the face, and it turned my stomach. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I'm not telling this story to get any pity. No, I'm sharing it because I know there are guys out there, just like me, completely clueless while their wives are out sneaking around. Believe me, I never thought I'd be one of them. But I was. And if it could happen to me, it can happen to anyone. Once I started checking Maya's phone, the truth unraveled fast. This wasn't just some harmless fling or recent mistake. This was a full-blown affair stretching over a damn year. Can you believe that? A whole year of lies, manipulation, and betrayal, all right under my nose. And what stung the most? They were experts at keeping it hidden. This wasn't a slip-up. This was a well-rehearsed game they'd perfected. Using spyware, I discovered they weren't just sneaking around locally. They were meeting in hotels during her so-called business trips and work conferences. There were even times they flew to different cities just to be together. And the cherry on top? They had a separate bank account to fund their dirty little escapades. I saw them booking flights, reserving hotel rooms, dining at expensive restaurants. All things Maya never once mentioned to me. Not a peep. The pain of realizing all of this is something I can't even fully put into words. It felt like someone was stabbing me repeatedly in the gut. But what really twisted the knife was how long it had been going on. A whole year. I felt like a fool for not catching on sooner. Still, no matter how badly I wanted to blow up and confront her right then and there, I couldn't. Not yet. We had 2 daughters, Grace and Ella. They didn't deserve to get dragged into this mess. I had to be careful, buy myself some time, and figure out my next move. From that moment on, every time I looked at Maya, all I saw was betrayal. She would go about her day, pretending like everything was normal, but I wasn't buying it. I could see the guilt written all over her face, and it finally made sense why she had been so cold and distant lately. Every excuse she had, work's been stressful, or I'm just really tired, it was all bullshit. She wasn't overwhelmed by work. She was overwhelmed by the weight of living a double life. It became clear to me that Luke wasn't just a fling. He filled some emotional void in her that I apparently wasn't able to anymore. And that realization hit harder than the affair itself. It wasn't just my body being replaced. It was my role as her partner, emotionally and mentally. Our life together, everything we had built, wasn't enough for her. And even though she tried to act loving around the house, I could see the cracks. The guilt was eating her alive, but she was in too deep to turn back. Still, I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I wanted to be strategic about this. I needed to make sure that when I did act, I'd have all the leverage. No outbursts, no screaming matches where she could twist the situation to make me the villain. No, when I made my move, it had to be decisive and final. So, in the meantime, I played dumb. I kept things as normal as possible, for the sake of the kids. I helped Grace with her homework, drove Ella to soccer practice, kept doing everything a good dad is supposed to do. I wasn't going to let my daughters see the cracks in our marriage. Not yet. They were too young to understand the storm brewing behind the scenes. And I wasn't going to let Maya's selfishness shatter their world. Not until I was ready to strike. But each day, keeping up the facade got harder. Every time Maya was on her phone, I knew she was probably texting Luke. Every time she claimed to be working late or out with friends, I knew where she really was. And it ate me up inside. I'd lie in bed next to her, fully aware that she had just come back from being with another man, and I'd have to act like everything was fine. It wasn't just anger that burned inside me. It was the complete sense of betrayal. I had given this woman everything. My love, my life, my children, and in return, she was giving herself to someone else. I could have confronted her, laid it all out, but I didn't. I held back. I needed more time. I had to plan my revenge. So, I waited. I watched. I let her think she was getting away with it, but I was always 2 steps ahead, gathering more proof, letting her dig herself deeper into her own grave. When I finally made up my mind to play the long game, I knew I had to be smart. Maya had to believe she was still in control, that she had me completely fooled. So, I played my part. I acted like the loving, clueless husband who didn't have a care in the world. It wasn't easy, but I had to sell it. I gave her space when she needed it, pretended her late nights didn't bother me, and even started asking her about work just to keep up appearances. Every time she lied to my face, I smiled and nodded, but inside, it felt like pouring gasoline on the fire that was already raging. But I wasn't just sitting back, letting her think she was getting away with it. Behind the scenes, I was putting all the pieces in place. First off, I began moving small amounts of money into a private account. Nothing too obvious, just enough to slowly build a cushion. I wasn't going to be caught off guard when everything hit the fan. I knew I'd need a financial lifeline when the time came to drop the divorce bomb. At the same time, I was gathering every bit of evidence I could get my hands on. Every text, every call, every single detail of her affair with Luke. I made sure to save everything, screenshots, emails, even pictures. I wanted to ensure that when the moment arrived, she wouldn't be able to deny a thing. No playing the victim, no twisting the narrative. I had all the proof, and I wasn't afraid to use it. One of the smartest moves I made was hiring a divorce lawyer early on. I kept it all under wraps, consulting with him in secret. I told him the whole story, and he laid out a plan to not only get me out of the marriage, but to make sure I didn't get screwed in the process. Together, we mapped out a strategy, and part of that was about timing. We decided to wait until the case was rock solid before I blindsided her with the divorce papers when she'd least expect it. Then, things started to get even more interesting. I knew Luke had a wife, Olivia. I'd seen her around at school events, PTA meetings, the usual stuff. She seemed like a decent woman, although she always kept to herself. Can't really blame her, being married to a guy like Luke. I figured she had the right to know the truth, but I wasn't about to just dump it on her all at once. I needed her to be on my side, so I had to play it smart. I started setting up playdates for our daughters, Grace and Ella, with Olivia's kids, who went to the same school. At first, it was all casual, just the kids playing while we chatted a bit. Nothing deep. I wanted to build trust, get her comfortable around me. Slowly, I started dropping subtle hints. Little things like, Maya's been working a lot of late nights with Luke lately. That must be tough. Or funny how work can keep pulling people in different directions. Nothing too direct, just enough to plant a seed of doubt. Before long, I could tell Olivia was starting to get suspicious. It was in the way she looked at her phone when Luke wasn't around, or how her smile would fade whenever I brought up work. She was putting the pieces together, but she needed that final nudge. That's when I gave her exactly what she needed, the proof. I showed her some of the evidence I collected. Not everything, just enough to confirm her worst fears. Texts between Maya and Luke, some suggestive messages, plans for hotel rooms. I didn't overwhelm her with it all at once, but it was more than enough. The color drained from her face, and I could see the heartbreak hit her like a truck. But Olivia didn't lose it. She didn't scream or burst into tears. She just sat there, staring at the screen, her hands trembling. I had a feeling something wasn't right, she whispered. I just didn't want to believe it. I felt for her. I knew exactly what she was going through because I was going through it too. But there was a part of me, the cold and calculating part, that needed her to be on my side. Olivia was going to be my secret weapon, and together, we were going to take them both down. I wasn't looking for a clean break. That would have been too easy. No, I wanted them to feel the full weight of their betrayal, to suffer the way I had. Divorce wasn't going to cut it. I wanted to expose them, make sure everyone saw them for who they really were. That was my endgame. Months of planning had led to this moment. Olivia and I had carefully orchestrated every detail, every move, every word. Maya and Luke thought they were still in the clear, that their affair was safely hidden in the shadows. But we were about to drag it into the light, and there would be no going back. It all kicked off with our 10-year wedding anniversary. 10 years of marriage, and she didn't even see what was coming. I suggested we take a romantic weekend getaway to reconnect. I laid it on thick, bought flowers, wrote a sweet note, said all the things she wanted to hear. I could see the guilt flash across her face when I mentioned it. She hesitated for a second, probably trying to figure out how she was going to juggle both me and Luke that weekend. But in the end, she agreed. How could she say no to a doting husband trying to reignite the spark? Meanwhile, Olivia was setting things in motion on her end. She arranged for Luke to go on a business trip, something Maya was more than familiar with by now. The plan was falling into place perfectly. Luke wouldn't suspect a thing. We chose a hotel they'd be comfortable sneaking off to, one they'd used before. Everything was set. On the night of the trip, it all went according to plan. Maya and I checked into the hotel, but I had no intention of staying with her. Olivia and I had been tracking Luke and Maya for weeks, so we knew exactly where they'd end up. I made up some excuse about needing to handle a work call, and I slipped out of the room. My heart was racing, but my mind was clear. This was it. Olivia was already sitting in the hotel lobby when I arrived. We exchanged a quick nod. No words were needed. We both knew exactly what was about to unfold. Together, we headed to the room where Luke and Maya were meeting, my heart pounding with adrenaline. I had the camera ready, making damn sure they wouldn't be able to talk their way out of this one. Waiting in that hallway felt like a lifetime. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was pure, unfiltered rage. Months of holding it all inside, pretending everything was normal while they carried on with their little affair. And then, finally, we saw them. They arrived separately, just like they always did. First Luke, then Maya, sneaking into the room like it was their own private escape. They had no idea their perfect little secret was about to be blown wide open. We gave them a few minutes to get comfortable, just enough time for them to drop their guard. Then, without a word, Olivia and I stormed in. The look on their faces was worth every second of the wait. Maya's eyes widened in shock, her mouth hanging open as she tried to process what was happening. Luke froze, completely caught off guard. They hadn't even had the chance to cover themselves properly. It was a perfect, humiliating snapshot of their pathetic little secret life. I watched the panic flood Maya's face as she realized what was going on, but it was far too late. My camera captured every moment. I kept my voice calm, cold. Surprise, Maya. I've known for a long time about all of it. She started to stammer, trying to come up with some excuse, but I wasn't interested. The time for her lies had long passed. Her face went pale, her hands shaking like she couldn't even control them. She couldn't meet my eyes, and that's when I knew it was over. She knew it too. There was no squirming out of this. Olivia stood silently beside me, her expression as unreadable as mine. Luke, on the other hand, had this deer-in-the-headlights look, like he couldn't wrap his head around what was happening. Honestly, it seemed like he was more concerned about what Olivia would do to him than anything else. I made sure to capture every second on camera, every word, every pathetic attempt they made to save face. Maya could barely speak, and the few times she tried, I cut her off with a dismissive wave of my hand. "Don't bother," I said, my voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "You don't get to explain anything." Strangely, as I stood there watching their world collapse, a calmness settled over me. After months of rage and betrayal, I finally felt detached. I had prepared for this moment for so long that now, It almost felt like I was watching someone else's life play out in front of me. There was no screaming, no yelling, none of the drama you might expect. Just the cold, hard truth laid out for all of us to see. Maya stood frozen in place while Luke fumbled for words, desperately trying to salvage his pride. But nothing they could say or do would change a damn thing. Olivia and I left that hotel room without another word. We didn't need to stick around and watch them try to pick up the pieces. We had what we came for, proof. There was no denying it now. The truth was out, and there was no way for them to hide from it anymore. As we walked away, I knew this was just the beginning. The divorce would come next, and with the evidence I had, Maya didn't stand a chance. But in that moment, walking out of that hotel, I already felt like I had won. Sure enough, just a few days later, Maya came crawling back. I found her in the kitchen, the same place we used to share meals, now the scene of our broken marriage. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. "Ben, please," she begged, her voice shaky and desperate. "It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking clearly. I still love you. We can fix this." Her words were empty. A mistake? A year-long affair, secret trips, hotel rendezvous, and a hidden bank account. That wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate choice. And as for love, whatever we had was destroyed the moment she decided to give herself to someone else. I stared at her, feeling nothing but cold indifference. "You didn't make a mistake, Maya. You made a series of choices. Every time you met him, every time you lied to me, that was a choice. Don't stand here now and pretend you loved me then. You didn't. And I doubt you love me now." Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks, but I didn't care. I wasn't about to let her weasel her way back into my life with a half-baked apology and crocodile tears. This wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about closure, and more importantly, consequences. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the divorce papers I had been holding onto for days. The look on her face when I handed them to her was almost satisfying. Shock, disbelief, and horror flashed across her face in a heartbeat. "Sign them," I said, my voice steady and cold. "We're done." She looked down at the papers, her hands trembling like they were barely able to hold on. "Ben, please," she whispered, her voice thick with desperation. "Don't do this. We can fix it. I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything you ask." I shook my head, my voice steady. "There's nothing left to fix. You killed our marriage, and I have no interest in trying to bring something back to life that's already gone." She didn't try to argue after that. She just stood there, gripping the divorce papers like they were her last hope, but they were slipping through her fingers. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her alone with the mess she'd made. The fallout came fast. Olivia didn't waste any time either. She filed for divorce from Luke the very next day, and the scandal spread through our social circle like wildfire. Soon, everyone knew what had happened. Luke lost his job. Not exactly surprising, considering sleeping with a colleague's wife doesn't do wonders for your corporate reputation. As for Maya, her social standing crumbled. Our mutual friends distanced themselves, and whispers about her affair followed her everywhere. It was almost poetic, really. While I had been the one left humiliated and betrayed, now it was Maya and Luke who were feeling the weight of public shame. Their dirty little secret wasn't hidden anymore, and there was no way for them to escape it. But the gossip and ruined reputations? That didn't matter to me as much as my kids, Grace and Ella. I wasn't about to let Maya drag them through the wreckage of her choices. I had gathered enough evidence to make sure I'd get full custody. And when the time came for the court hearings, that's exactly what happened. The judge didn't even hesitate before awarding me full custody of both girls, pointing to Maya's infidelity and instability. Watching Maya's face as the judge read the decision was a moment that'll stay with me forever. She looked shattered, like everything she had fought to hold on to was slipping right through her fingers. And in a way, she had lost me, her social reputation, and now, the most important thing of all, our children. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had fought hard, and I had won. Now it was time to move on. When everything was said and done, I stood on the other side of the storm, victorious. The divorce settlement went exactly as I had planned. I kept the family home, the place where Grace and Ella had grown up, the place that still held echoes of the life we once had. I walked away with primary custody of my daughters, ensuring they stayed with me, away from the chaos Maya had caused. And Maya? She was left with nothing but scraps, a small apartment, and limited visitation rights. Everything she thought she could hold on to was gone. It wasn't just about the house or the money. She had thrown away her family for a temporary thrill, and now she had to live with that. I had spent months setting the stage for this, making sure every move was calculated. And in the end, it all paid off. Financially, I was secure, but more than that, I had reclaimed my life. I didn't just survive Maya's betrayal. I took back control. Every bit of evidence I gathered, every strategic decision I made, led to this victory. I wasn't the one left picking up the pieces. Maya, on the other hand, was struggling. After the affair became public, she found herself isolated, forced to face the consequences of her actions. Luke was out of the picture, his life in ruins after losing his job and his marriage. He was nothing more than a fleeting distraction for Maya, something to fill the void. And now, that void was bigger than ever. She had to figure out where she had gone wrong, but it wasn't my concern anymore. I had no regrets. The pain she caused was real, but so was the strength I found in rebuilding my life. I focused on being the best father I could be for Grace and Ella, making sure they knew they were loved and protected. The time I spent with them became the most valuable part of my day. Watching them laugh, play, and grow reminded me that I had a purpose, one that went far beyond the mess Maya had made. For the first time in a long while, I trusted myself again. I realized that Maya's betrayal didn't break me. It made me stronger. I had come through it with my dignity intact, something Maya could never say for herself. She had become a shadow of the woman I once knew, left to rebuild the life she had so carelessly destroyed. In the end, my revenge wasn't about tearing her down. It was about taking back everything she tried to steal from me. My sense of self, my confidence, my future. By playing the long game, by staying patient and keeping my cool, I didn't just win the divorce. I won my life back. I showed Maya that her betrayal wasn't the end of me. It was the start of something better. I'm not sharing this story because I'm proud of what happened. I'm sharing it because I want people to understand that you can make it through. When you're betrayed like that, it feels like your world is collapsing, but if you keep your head straight and stay focused, you can rebuild. You can take your life back, just like I did. In the end, Maya's downfall wasn't my victory. It was her own. She chose the path she's on. All I did was make sure she couldn't take me down with her. It's been a year since everything went down, and I figured I'd give you all an update. A lot has changed in my life, and honestly, I never thought I'd be in such a good place after everything that happened. If you had told me a year ago that I'd come out of this stronger, happier, and at peace, I probably would have laughed in your face. To start with, I've been doing well, better than I expected. Once the dust settled, I threw myself into rebuilding, focusing all my energy on being the best father I could be for Grace and Ella. They're doing great, by the way. They adjusted to the changes faster than I ever imagined. I think staying in the family home gave them a sense of stability, and I've made sure they always know they're loved, no matter what. As for Maya, she's pretty much faded from our lives. She has her visitation rights, but the relationship between her and the girls is strained, to put it lightly. I don't push them one way or the other. I let them decide for themselves. And right now, they're not too keen on spending much time with her. I think they're still trying to process everything in their own way. Maya's been trying to put her life back together, but from what I hear, it hasn't been easy. She's still facing the fallout from the affair, and it doesn't sound like she's made much headway. On my end, I've moved on. That doesn't mean it was always smooth sailing. There were days where the weight of everything hit me hard, where I wondered if I'd ever feel normal again. But time is a way of healing, and slowly, I found my footing. In fact, I've been seeing someone, We've been together for a few months, and it's been really good. I won't get into too many details, but she's brought a kind of peace into my life that I hadn't felt in a long time. There's no drama, no secrets, just honesty and support, which is exactly what I needed. Work's been steady, and I've started focusing more on the future. I've been saving up, planning some trips with the girls. We've already done one trip to the beach, and watching them laugh and play in the sand without a care in the world was one of the best feelings I've had in a long time. I want to give them the kind of childhood they deserve, one that isn't tainted by the mistakes and mess of their parents. Looking back, I don't regret how everything unfolded. If anything, I'm grateful for it. Maya's betrayal forced me to take a hard look at my life, to focus on what really matters. Sure, it hurt like hell at the time, but it didn't break me. It gave me a chance to rebuild, to come out stronger, and to show my daughters that no matter how hard life knocks you down, you can always get back up. So yeah, I'm doing well. Better than I ever thought I'd be a year ago. To everyone who followed my story and offered support, thank you. It meant more than you know. And if you're going through something similar, just remember, it does get better. You just have to keep pushing forward.